The year was 1963, and America was at a breaking point. Across the country, voices were rising, demanding equality, demanding freedom, demanding justice. In big cities, marches and protests made headlines, but in small towns, the fight was quieter, lonelier, and far more dangerous. One of those towns was Greenwood, Mississippi, a place where invisible lines separated black families from white families, where schools, restaurants, and even water fountains carried labels that reminded people daily of the cruel weight of segregation. In this town lived Sarah Johnson, a 14-year-old girl with eyes that carried more wisdom than her years and a spirit that refused to be crushed. Sarah lived with her grandmother, an elderly woman who had worked her entire life scrubbing floors for white families. Her grandmother would often tell her stories of endurance, whispering late at night, "Child, the world may try to keep you small, but you are destined to stand tall. Remember, they can strip away our rights, but they can't strip away our dignity unless we let them." Sarah's dream was simple yet powerful. She wanted to be a teacher. She longed to stand in front of a classroom filled with children and show them the world through books, lessons, and hope. But every day, her dream felt further away. She attended the black school in Greenwood, a building with peeling paint, broken desks, and outdated books missing whole chapters. Across town stood the white school, tall and pristine, with shiny new books, polished floors, and buses that carried its students safely to class. Sarah didn't need to be told she wasn't welcome there. The very sight of the building was enough. Still, she held her dream close. Each morning, she walked past that white school, refusing to lower her eyes, even when taunts were thrown her way. She would whisper to herself, "Knowledge is power. They can't take what's in my mind." One humid summer evening, Sarah overheard her grandmother talking with neighbors. The news was spreading fast. There would be a great march in Washington, D.C. Leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were calling for people across the nation to gather, to demand jobs and freedom, to demand justice. Sarah listened from the doorway, her heart racing. She wanted desperately to go, to be part of something bigger than herself. But her grandmother shook her head gently. The trip was too far, too expensive, and far too dangerous for a young girl. Yet Sarah's heart would not be quiet. She lay awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking of those who would march in Washington. She thought of the children in her town who were too afraid to speak, too scared to stand. And she decided that if she could not go to Washington, then she would march right there in Greenwood. The next morning, she rose before the sun. She put on her best dress, a faded but carefully ironed garment her grandmother had saved for church. She braided her hair neatly and picked up a scrap of cardboard. With black paint and a steady hand, she wrote 4 simple words: equal rights, equal schools. She held the sign close, her heart pounding, and stepped out into the dusty street. At first, she walked alone. Her feet pressed into the dirt, her sign raised high, as curious eyes peeked out from porches and windows. Some shook their heads, whispering warnings. Others simply stared in silence. But Sarah kept walking, her small figure steady, her chin lifted high. Then something remarkable happened. A boy about her age stepped down from his porch and joined her. He carried no sign, but he walked beside her. Soon, 2 girls fell into step behind them. Within an hour, more than 50 children were marching silently through Greenwood. They carried no weapons, no anger, only determination. Their silence was louder than any shout. Word spread quickly. The sheriff and his deputies arrived, barking orders, threatening the children, trying to scare them back into their homes. But Sarah and the others kept walking. Their feet beat out a rhythm against the earth, a rhythm of courage, of defiance, of hope. By evening, the march was over, but its impact had only just begun. Newspapers picked up the story, calling it the March of Silence. Reporters described the sight of children standing taller than their years, refusing to bow to fear. Sarah's name was not printed, but those who were there would never forget the little girl with the cardboard sign who started it all. For Sarah, the march was just the beginning. She faced backlash, insults, and threats in the days that followed. Some neighbors scolded her grandmother, saying Sarah had brought trouble to the family. But her grandmother only looked at Sarah with pride and said, "You did what many grown folks are too scared to do. You showed them that silence can roar." Years later, When schools began to desegregate, Sarah was among the first black students to walk into the once all-white classroom. She carried her books proudly, her head held high. The desks were new, the books were whole, but what mattered most was that she had earned her place through courage. Sarah did become a teacher, just as she dreamed. And in her classroom, she often told her students the story of the march, not to glorify herself, but to show them that change begins with the smallest step. You don't have to be big to be brave, she would say. You just have to believe that your voice matters, even if all you can do is walk in silence. Her story traveled far beyond Greenwood, carried in whispers, in retellings, in the memories of those who saw her march. It became a lesson, not just about the fight for civil rights, but about the unshakable power of youth, courage, and hope. Sarah's March of Silence proved that even in the smallest towns, even in the quietest moments, history can be made by those who dare to stand tall.